ma'am. Everything is
Oh,
fine now.
yes, ma'am.
I had switched my network, and maybe that will take care of all the issues. And we will just see. I apologize for that. All right. So, दो चीजें हैं. If you have not already looked at the understanding of where and what the paper and what the elements are about, we will just go ahead and check, uh, you know, what you understand of the text. अगर आप में से किसी ने पढ़ा है, तो please feel free to jump in and ask questions, right? So basically, this is the chapter that we are looking at, types of languages that we are going to be focusing on. This is your chapter 3. Or isme, they have given you already what we're going to discuss, right? This is about the different types of languages, the factors that provide a variety of language status of a standard dialect, the power relations that occur between the varieties of language, and the reasons for the difference in the way that men and women speak, and the stylistic use of language. We really focus on this. So if you have already read it, some of what I will just introduce you to will be will look redundant. But I just want us to take us through what the chapter really does. So it talks about the fundamental mechanics of language and then looks at the overall power that language has in society. So as pointed out in the beginning of your chapter, one language sets you in a corridor for life, but two languages are opening all the doors along the way, and more than two will be really good. And there are different kinds of languages. For instance, if you're looking at the text, if this is one of the ways that you could represent it, and I've used Notebook LM to try and create the graphics, but the taxonomy of tongues, if you're looking at it in terms of the natural evolution versus, so if you're looking at it as a graph, there is a natural evolution of languages that comes in. And then there is an intentional construction that comes in. For instance, you have programming languages in computer science, which is more formal, more machine-like. And you have also languages which are constructed completely that you may have read about in your chapters, like Esperanto, Klingon. These are constructed because they use certain patterns and created. In fact, Esperanto has a very interesting stories. Surendra, I think of the 4 books, this is one of the books, and if not, then as Ganga said, you will, by Monday, if you wait, after that it will be processed, right? So now in the natural evolution, a lot of other languages, which are not considered language because there's no dictionary to them. For instance, the para-language of tone. I'm not angry. If I say that, then obviously it sounds angry. So even if I'm saying I'm not angry, no one is going to believe it. And proxemics, like, coming together, or kinesics, where you are kind of moving, and the movement that you have, you walk angrily across a room, or you are having chronomics, where the time and the structure is looking at how, say, coming up in punctuality, or thinking about ordering something from most important to least important, or sequencing it from reverse order chronology or in the single chronology. All of these have an impact on the information received and shared and processed, but they are not having a dictionary in a sense where you can go and look it up. And so while there is a natural evolution to some of these tones of the body language and gestures and facial expressions, and it is very cultural. For instance, Americans tend to look more at the mouth when someone is speaking, so your smile becomes more attractive, and they think that you're happy based on your lips. But Asians tend to look at the eyes, and a lot of, especially Southeast Asians and East Asians, look at the eyes, and they tend to look at the fact that you can have songs like "Tum itna kyun muskura rahe ho," aankhon mein nami, kya dard chupa rahe ho, that kind of things that you can look at. Can we teach those expressions which we mean but we don't say, Deepa? That's a good question. We can teach it, but we also have to understand that it's culturally different, right? Like the meanings are different, and they don't always mean the same thing. So, for instance, in Turkey, etc., using the word peace is considered, it is not considered the sign of peace that we have, that if you was able to see on my screen and with my video, you will find that it is considered peace universally. But if you are from certain countries, it can have the connotation of an abusive language, right? So there is these problems that come in. But yes, you can teach, and we do teach them. We teach about the fact that you must have your shoulders straight, you must smile, you must maintain eye contact, but not maintain too much eye contact. We do teach it. We teach it in etiquette classes, we teach it in communication classes, and we should teach it. But students should also understand that what they think is aggressiveness, maybe assertiveness in some cases, what they think is, stealth, maybe shyness in some cases. So they need to understand that there are varieties that come in. And so that is where the natural evolution, that's why it's not considered a language, because it can't transcend the time and the space, really. It doesn't go and evolve. It is very, very contextual, right? A lot of the paralanguage and body language is contextual. Comedy is very contextual. So though it uses language, it is actually within a context. Us daire mein, us samay ke liye kya sahi tha? That is very important. And if you're looking at the spoken, there is a lot of things. And the difference in dialect and language, this is something that you will come across. And there are people who will give you a very famous quote is, a language is just a dialect with an army. So dialects are also languages in many cases, but they don't have the power. They don't have powerful people looking at it. Yadvendra, I think I just answered your question, that can dialects turn into language? And they are all considered in many cases a language. In India, we have 22 main languages that have been recognized. But why? And that is on a rupee note, etc. And everyone keeps trying to win and put their things on that note and be recognized. But the fact is that all the different, like in Hindi is in this mishran of the mixture of many dialects, as you would call them. But some of these dialects are older languages than Hindi. Maithili is an older language than Hindi, but you wouldn't, it would be called a dialect. And so linguists consider all dialects to be equal as languages. Politically, languages are recognized as languages when there is a certain clout, a certain political action, a certain kind of power that gets associated with the language. And that is when politically it gets accepted as a language, and that has legal ramifications. But linguists consider every spoken variation dialect to be a language. They do, right? So that would turn into a lot of these other things. So that's what, Sheetal, that answers your question. And yes, and we are looking at sorry, Liz Rani had some question. I'll just answer that. All languages are contextual. Lisa Rani, that is true to some extent. They are. Even in English, there is a variety of Englishes. For instance, South African English has about 10,000 words that are so unique to South African English that an Englishman will not understand. For instance, one of the famous things that if you have read David Crystal, you will realize is he gives this example in one of his videos which says, they say turn left at the robot. And what do you mean by robot? And that is the signal, because there is a robot man who stands there and says red. So that is what they have considered. The signal is what they have considered robot. And so similarly, there are contextual words that only are prevalent in one language and not the other. And even within American English and British English, some words don't mean the same. For instance, words like gas, or uh, gas in America would mean petrol, but in many of the English and England based English speaking countries, including England, but also India, gas does not, it would mean CNG gas per se, and petrol is petrol pump, right? We don't say gas station, we would say petrol pump. So yes, there are differences, but it is definitely also available in a dictionary, which body language and paralanguage do not have. So there is this thing. So Rashmi, as I said, the fact is that if there are many languages in India that are older than Hindi, and they are all part of the Hindi, greater land. So when we say that there are so many Hindi speakers in India, they're not necessarily Hindi speakers per se. They may be speaking Bihari or Rajasthani or Maithili for that matter, or Bhojpuri and so on. And you would club them all under Hindi because it's a little convenient to do it. Chhattisgarhi, for instance, is also considered as part of Hindi, but it's also recognized as a language, right? India has 1,500 plus languages that are recognized in the idiolect and all of it, but you would put it across and say largely the grammar, the vocabulary, the structure comes in. Largely we have in our constitution written as what is Hindi is a political element of using the Devanagari script, because Hindi also gets written with other scripts like the Brahmi script. But we have politically recognized that Hindi is our official language, and therefore it has the more political clout of what is. And even in Hindi, what is the Hindi? The Hindustani Hindi, right? Like you have Allahabadi Hindi and Lucknowi Hindi have differences. Hyderabadi Hindi is very different if you have heard them. So we have a particular Hindustani Hindi, which is the Delhi style, which is the one which more in the UP Delhi belt is the one that we kind of use as a larger Hindi element. So there are many dialects and idiolects that you would have. And that is the same that is true for English, right? In English in India, we use the English version of England. And there are American Englishes, there is Australian English, there is New Zealand English, there is African English, there is a variety of Indian Englishes. So all of them are kind of elements that you would have. And there is English, of course, yes. And English is elements. Urdu makes...
Ma'am, I'll just request you. We'll take all the questions in the last 20-25 minutes. So as of now, you can go ahead with your presentation.
I'll do that. But you can continue typing in your questions as and when you're getting it. I will
of that, and we'll share that.
Yes,
Sure.
I will do that. So I just wanted to point out that you would have to think about all these elements of what are dialects and languages, and you should, and these are good questions to ask. So when you're looking at the written script, there is spoken, and not all the spoken languages have written. You would also find that in the text that is pointed out. And there are different kinds of writing schemes. One is alphabetic, like sorry. अगर सुनाई नहीं दे रहा है तो आप let me know, but otherwise, yeah, thank you.
Ma'am, please go ahead. We'll mute the speaker. As of now, we do not entertain, in call questions. Please, ma'am. Okay.
Yeah, ठीक है. Yeah. So, I will. So alphabetic, which is the A, B, C, D, or in terms of it, and the logographic, which is like the Mandarin script where you can draw it, and the word almost means, the written script almost means the word, right? They will use it almost in that manner. So the Mandarin is the closest that you would look at. And then you have visual, like the Braille, which is also it is also very textual, it's tactile. So you can read it, and then there's the Morse code, which can be also tactile, but also just written out in the way of letters and through dots and dashes. And there is symbolic, like emojis, pictograms, etc. These are all being intentional constructions. A lot of the human processing comes in from there, right? So I will go in and talk about the fact that if you're looking through, you would have to understand why you would have it. We already spoke about this, so I'm not going to go much into it. There is the paralanguage, the fact that tone, the way I said about angry, etc., changes it. There is proxemics, where people will, space will dictate how your language is there, and that is very contextual. The gestures, the verbal barriers, and yes, you must teach a lot of the differences, but also understand how, and theater and pictograms, where you have the graphic symbols, and this is something that we necessarily use with language a lot, the written text that comes in. Right? So what happens with a living network? Languages are never static. And I think we in India know this very well, that they are constantly changing. You spoke about English, etc. And English and other languages will always change. English adapts itself. It brings into contact with other languages. They are contacting between different communities. So it uses something from India. There are 900,000 words almost now in the English language, which are only from India, like pariah and Bengal and Jodhpur and khaki and all of these colors, or Bangla for that matter, are all from Indian languages, Tamil from Hindi and so on. And so it changes as a result. It expands its vocabulary, as I was giving you. And for instance, the Tamil interjection "ayyo" was added into the Oxford in 2020. And so you have a lot of very interesting features that come in. It also has mutation. It changes, like English, where you're looking at this entire mixture of languages. And if it doesn't get used, if it doesn't get sustained, if it doesn't get moved, it does die. It becomes dormant. And we don't call languages dying, because we have seen examples of dead languages being revived. Currently, there is a movement to ensure that Sanskrit remains from dormancy. It moves into a living language, and you have in Uttarakhand and so on very intense activities to ensure that the language continues to thrive. And languages in Karnataka, where there's a village that speaks Sanskrit, etc., which enables the dormant languages to be revived. And we can go back into old ancient worlds and revive some of the languages if we so choose to. But it has to be a conscious process that comes in, right? I wanted to point out that your text does talk about the pidgin and the collusion and the creole as such. Linguists have different kinds of ways of presenting it. The way it has been presented in the text is that pidgin will be a nascent, unstable, temporary mix of shared words. You will find in other texts that you read about the pidgin that it's not necessarily that it's only two neighboring languages that mix, and then the result becomes a pidgin, and that the pidgin generally and gradually becomes a creole. That is one, but it could be where pidgin is there, where groups without a common language need a restricted means of communication, right? So a lot of other linguist textbooks will also tell you that it could be not neighboring languages, but any two languages which may be very, very different from each other, and they have all come to a common place. Maybe they migrated, maybe someone from China and Africa migrated to the Arctic pole, and then they needed to speak to each other, and that is what the communication comes in. It could be because of colonization as well. A lot of pidgins have developed because of that. So it's not necessarily a geographical border. So when they said neighboring, it doesn't mean geographically neighboring. It can, though that also is there, right? Like you have a mixture of two state languages where they're coming together. Two states have two different languages, or two countries have two different languages. They come together and they make for pidgin. But pidgins can also evolve from other places. And creole emerges when a pidgin of course, from pidgins, but it could also evolve from a community language where it undergoes expansion. So when you're looking at it, not every pidgin becomes a Creole, and not every Creole is only through one developmental route. I'll give you an example. Hinglish, for instance, is got a variety of Hinglishes. So you have the Devanagari words having suffixes and grammar of English, like chutneyfy, dalofy, and so on. And you have the other elements where you have the English words becoming getting into the vocabulary, getting into the Hindi grammar per se. And those are elements where you don't have one or two, and Creoles are also not, why are they not considered in a sense, uh, they are not necessarily considered inferior or incomplete. They just are limited to a particular group of people who are using it, and therefore they may not have enough clout in a sense. But there are, like Creole is entirely the whole Jamaica and all of these, their languages are called Creoles, but they are complete languages there. And schools, and I'll get back to schools and education a bit later. So I just wanted to point out that you will have linguists who will stay it, and it is not Creole always emerging from a pidgin. It could also emerge from a community changing its dialect a little bit to suit other customs and coming in and allowing. And that is something else that I wanted to talk about from fusion. Konkani is now involved into the element that comes in, but this is where I wanted to just say that, we can highlight the element that Konkani people will consider that it is a very independent language, right? This is the entire debate that comes between Tamil and Sanskrit, which is the older language. And you have a variety of archaeologists and artifacts that come in and talk about these. Similarly, the Konkani people will say, oh, we have an independent history, we will look at it. So understand that languages are not, the idea that we come up with languages are that it depends on how much of evidence we have, how far back we can go in history. Where is it written? Now, how can we date that rock? Because typically a lot of these old stories are written on rocks. So then we date the rock, then we see the carving and see how that carving with the rock comes in. So a lot of it is really interesting in terms of the linguistic studies that we are looking at. And yes, they have a element where the Kerala Malayalam, it will be different from the Goan Konkani or and so on and so forth. But there is an entire element that comes in with a variation of language, right? And so within language, you also have this entire notion of dialect, register, and slang, right? So dialect is the language that we are speaking, that you are coming in, that is spoken, is sped, is connected to a geography, to a social identity. Again, geography is limited, right? Like in Portuguese is spoken in both Europe and in South America as continents. And Spanish is spoken in both Europe and in South American nations, in some South American nations as things. But they slightly differ, right? But they are largely Spanish or Portuguese or any of those languages. So it's geographical identity, but also very necessarily the social identity. And then you have the register. So registers will be different. They will be moving up and down. You have the register which goes in as stating, I want to have very formal academic language. There is a register to it. You will use fancy words, very informal language, how are you doing, etc. But if I want to talk about it in a very formal way, I may ask, I hope you're doing well. I state it in a very different manner. I don't just say, how are you doing, or anything of that sort. Those become your professional, contextual identities. Registers can be medical register, legal register. Most of us don't know how to read those legal documents. They're written in English or even in Hindi or Marathi or whichever other language you use. And sometimes you're just reading it and saying, okay, what does this mean? And this is the sentence and the register and the sentence structure that happens. So legal register, journalistic register, medical register. There are so many different kinds and ways that they are focusing on as to what that slang is, academic versus informal communication and so on. And so they may also have very specialized vocabularies for certain specific professions, fields, or depending on that, locations, right? So board, as is pointed out, this is from your text actually as an example. Board is a classroom register where you're talking about is a whiteboard or a blackboard, but in a board in corporate world will be the group of people who are taking all the decisions, and that is the governing group, right? And then the slang comes in, which is an in-group identity, and children and teenagers will be using this largely in terms of the way that they speak. Suddenly you can't understand. Nowadays with Gen Z and Gen Alpha lingo, sometimes you're looking and saying, what are they talking about? I don't even understand this word. Like dude, cool, macha. Yes, some of it, yes, but some of it is in today. You have Skibidi Toilet and God knows what else from BTS, etc., that they bring in. And pronunciation can definitely, while it can lead to differences that create some misunderstandings, the fact is that words are not ever pronounced the same way. So even within England, if you're looking at the contextual lexicon, you will find that in England itself, and I keep saying this a lot, if you go to Liverpool side, even today in 2026, last I was actually in 2017, but I will tell you that it is the same even today. Very many of the local people will say bus as bus. What time is the bus coming in, Luv? This is so they use the sound of bus and love as oo, and so it is not necessarily that pronunciation there is one standard. Schedule, etc. Yes, and there are constantly new words being added to also. Sometimes it becomes slang, and it is possible. Please note the arrow. Slang can slowly become proper, get involved and be accepted in language. For instance, vibe coding or Google, or we today use Google as not just a noun, but also as an adjective, as an adverb. This is Googleable. This is to be Googled. Google this, right? So slowly over a period of time, new words introduced can become and accepted in language as long as the dictionary and the lexicography allows it. Hybridism is something else that we can take away from. And so we can look at television and infotainment and ghabrified. Again, these are words that have come from your examples of the text. So I hope that you read, and dalofy and all of it. I've heard so many of these. So they come from these hybrid elements that work on, and many a time, if you do code switching or translanguaging. Code switching is when I move from English to Hindi, Hindi to English. Translanguaging would be when I try and explain everything to you as, you're looking at it, the word in terms of it that comes through, where you're focusing on how these different languages operate. Multilingualism is where I will resourcefully use all the languages. And so you would try and explain one language through another language in translanguaging and so on and so forth. And those become interesting features that come in. And you can borrow, right? There is borrowing, there is blending. There is borrowing as in I take from another language. I can blend it from another language. I can code switch in terms of, or code mix not in Ghabrified or Dalofy. It is code mixing, right? I take two languages and I mix them. Code switching is I would change from Hindi to English, English to Hindi or something. And then there is blending, like infotainment and so on. All of these come in as to the elements, and there is the idea that again, some of these words have very many different roots that are being focused upon, and we can look through some of these elements. But it's a larger term to use and say that it is hybridism. And we have to understand, you were asking about how does a language become a language. This is really it, that the mechanics of power really come in. And this is taken from, again, the book, as I wanted the visual to be there for you to know and see. Anil, yes, there are. I mean, I'm looking at some of the questions and I will answer them if they're relevant. But is there a difference? Yes, but primarily, let's not get fixated on terminology, as is understanding what is language supposed to be doing. Language is really about changing, adapting, when you are fixing and figuring out two different words to come in together. That is where language is. And I'm going to try and finish off in the next 10 minutes so that you can ask all your questions, and we'll spend more time on the questions, right? Just from that element that comes through. And we have a second language is not just an environmental axis, it becomes a position of power. We all know this, actually. We know that if we speak in the language of the person whom we are bargaining with, we're likely to get a better discount as a result. We know this. And so that is important. And the fact is, when you're looking at English in India, and it comes to the power scale, English is really about the fact that we did have an administrative history with English, and we are continuing to use English for administrative reasons. We have states that do not accept Hindi, like Tamil Nadu, etc. So you will need those states to, be communicated with, and so you would use English. So the Woods Dispatch, the creation of cheap labor, the idea of British administration, and yes, it came from Britain. It also was helpful and useful because no states agreed on a common language, and it was useful that there is a no winner, so no one feels that someone else won. So you can create a sense of harmony in that sense. And then we had a global lever. Right now, even though many states are saying, local medium schools, we have parents increasingly shifting children into English medium schools, because there is this scale of India that really focuses on the global politics of wanting their child to learn English and become a global citizen per se. And that has now channeled the way that our English schools are really being focused upon, and they want it. And about 140 million speakers in India, at least as per the Idiolect and the other kinds of sites like Ethnolinguist, etc., that you would have, note that there are so many speakers. The Census of India as of 2011 stated that English is at least spoken as a second language in many households. We'll see what happens with the census this time. We also understand that language is not neutral. We are not just speaking of English, but all languages, but that there is a masculine, a feminine, a neuter, and there are common genders. And we know this from also knowing a lot of our own languages which have genders in them. Not all our languages have it. So for instance, Tamil does not have gender, Bengali does not have gender. And so we do have those problems where they may not always be genderized, right? The idea that is now increasingly being focused upon is the idea of inclusion. So where the sex is irrelevant, and could remain unspecified, then we could just have something as a common element that focuses on. A lot of our languages think of neuter language as a gender. And I just am going to, I will share a video, but India in Pixels is a beautiful has a beautiful thing on Indian languages and gender that you could watch just for fun and to know more about it. But largely the rule is, and this is again from your text, if the action is more relevant than the gender, the language should reflect the action and not the sex. So this is where there is an argument that is made in the text as well. And this is what the argument that a lot of linguists are trying to do, is that let us take away the diagnosis, which is the sexist standard that comes in. For instance, policeman, or for instance, chairman or fireman. And we could have neutral alternatives like firefighter or police officer, so that everyone can feel, every gender can feel that they are part of it. It's not just man, woman, but also the third gender and all the different kinds of genders there are. Each student must submit his homework. So now what we have is they have put in as the neutral gender is there, right? So you will suddenly find Facebook and all of these coming in with their, even for the singular third person. And that has now become a kind of standard that is there and precedent. And yes, hey guys is also considered to be very focused on the people. And so maybe you should say, hey folks, or hey team, or everyone, hi everyone, etc. Even girls and boys and men and women is considered, or brothers and sisters is considered, that it doesn't consider all the genders. So you do have everyone just say, let's avoid it. And we have these differences where we are thinking of some people, sentimental and women, a bossy men, or assertive and aggressive, brave boy. And so we limit certain conditions, not just women, by the way, but also men who are limited to certain kinds of things. Oh, you must be strong, you're a man, but not all men need not be very strong, right? So can we use neutral alternatives? Can we come up with very elements that focus on some of these things, is what the text also says, right? So they have given you a lexicon where you could try this exercise with students, where you say, instead of forefathers, ancestors, mankind, humanity, man, staff, or human resources, waitress, server. So in airlines, instead of now saying air hostess and air steward, you would just say the staff, right? The wait staff, and so on. And jack of all trades, handy person, and not handyman, and so on. So rewiring it requires a lot of institutional language responsibilities. The Tamil Nadu High Court came up with almost 100 pages of writing of trying to say, how can we be more inclusive? And in our judgments, be more inclusive of all genders, and how they came up with framing of pronouns and addresses and everything to ensure that they do not disservice anyone and insult them, and they include everyone. And so, yes, there are institutional language practices that come into some of these focus areas, and language does affect our attitudes, etc. And so now we come to another part, which is more the tone and the register element. He fought bravely. It conveys the idea. This is taken again from the text as a sentence, but he fought bravely as a standard functional adverb, and it's not that it doesn't have any emotional resonance. It's just so overused that brave can be so different. Brave can mean he fought bravely, but it could be very undignified. He fought bravely, but maybe he is evil or he is good. But gallant has another very aesthetic, evocative word. It has a particular meaning of grace, of honor, and of romance. Now, you do not call any gallant person a villain. A villain will not fight gallantly. And so a villain, however, can be brave. And so those kinds of elements of how we can get people to understand how words have connotations, how words can really make meaning come alive for us, and how reflecting on them can make us think, and why it takes so much time to read a text, because you have to think, what are they trying to say? And that comes in there. And so you have this entire element that comes in. There's also structural elements where you have, I was able before I went to Elba, and then you have another, which is the Napoleon mix, where it's a palindrome, like Malayalam is a palindrome. Um, Able was I saw Elba, and primarily to say that I could read it backwards. So you will read able from the full stop. You can read it able was I saw Elba, and so that kind of play with languages. This is one kind of play. It could be words as well, like Malayalam. You can read it backwards. That's another palindrome, and other kinds of play, like using figures of speech, can really make us think a little bit about language, right? Like we can focus and work on how it changes our mindset when we use and play with languages, and try and think about structural elegance, rhythm, rhyme, figures of speech, and so on. And the other aspect that they come in is the fact that, how we can constantly understand that style begins with imitation. A lot of our sonnet, in fact, was imitation of the Latin sonnets in English. And so when people are imitating, and you will find that in AI world, a lot of people are imitating the AI delivery. And so it begins with imitation, observing and mimicking, and then you change, and then you vigor. And a lot of, therefore, they keep saying that pronunciation and modeling communication by the English language teacher is very important, because then the child will pick that up, imitate, and then improve and find their own style. But it's really just understanding that aesthetic understanding and language is it can be changed over a period of time as they listen to more and more people. So you have these kinds of where the art and elements come in. A lot of these words and dialogues and explanations are from your text itself. So language really, as a last part, is that it has mechanics. There is a precise architecture, syntax, registries, and types. It does always have an evolution. It is constantly changing. It can become from a biology of creoles, hybrids, mixtures, code switching, translanguaging, everything. It has power. It is definitely telling you whether it has authority or not, and whether it allows for equality or not, and that you fight and enable it to change to allow for equality. And it has aesthetics, the most beautiful part of our classrooms. The fact that there could be so much of personal identity, of cultural identity, human expression, and play at the language. And if we enable all of these to occur in our classrooms, it will be nice. And I like some of the questions that you've been constantly asking. This is really, if you look at it, what I have done is go through elements. I just wanted to highlight that the Indian Sign Language has this one part which is called ASL. That's not, the short form is ISL. But other than that, a lot of this is really the focus of how we have come into and done. In fact, some of these constructed languages have very interesting histories and stories that you will have with this. So this is really what the text is about and focuses on, and I would really recommend that you read it if you have not yet read it. For instance, they have come up with this word of bandicoot and cashew as what is the history that you would look at, and what are the dialects coming in, what is the register, etc. So I'll now stop and pause for your questions and look at it, but I just wanted to show you. And that's what I said, right? Like I've taken some of these from your text. Everything that was shown was from the text itself. So please do read it if you have not already read it. And it is really a focus idea. Now, there are certain questions that you had where I'm going to come in and ask. One of the questions that was there is Klingon a real? Yeah, come in. Yes, Ganga sir.
What we have done is that we have listed a few important questions which are really relevant to the topic. And on behalf of the participants, Vidhi can ask it. Even after that, if the participant has anything to add, they can ask it further. So Vidhi can ask questions on behalf of the participants.
Yes.
Okay, Vidhi.
So, like, should I
Yes,
share it
you
as
ask.
well?
Yeah, you can share. Vidhi has the question on the, she is also sharing the question on the screen. Ma'am, if you stop
Just
sharing this
I'll stop
question.
sharing. I'll stop sharing. Yes.
Yeah.
I will tell you more about some of those things. But yeah.
Yeah, question on the screen. Yeah, one by one, Vidhi, please.
Yes, sir.
Put the question one by one. Yeah, you have
Sir,
to,
I need
you have to
to.
go up. Yeah. 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 So
Let
this
me
is the
just come
question by
here 1 minute. Yes, 1 second. Yes. Yeah.
All right, ma'am. So the first question is, just a moment,
by Rajshri Soni.
by Rajshri Soni, and that is,
Yeah.
what
What is a language? Yeah. What's the role of body language in learning a
Body
language? Can we teach it from the beginning?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and you should do it from the beginning because so much of the childhood element is about knowing the language. You know, when we say, let's open the door, open. It's basically because the way that the mouth is opening, open, it is figuring out, it creates a sense of drama. And so you always think that there is going to be a drama, right? And you feel that when you open something, you may come across something new. You must get them to think about it that way. And so, yes, body language, the tone, the language, and the gestures, etc., are very important for teaching. Rajshri, and do use drama for it. Getting also children to understand, and just very quickly, but getting children to understand how tone and register and delivery can make a difference. You know, if I say, I'm very tired, today, and then someone says, I am so tired. You can feel the tiredness in the second. And then I am so tired today, you don't feel the tiredness. And so the believability, the credibility, and it makes for so much fun in the classroom. So I think those are elements.
Okay,
And
ma'am.
Aparna, that's a wonderful question. It is every teacher's nightmare to respect the students' dialects and helping them acquire the standard variety. I think NEP has given us a kind of solution where it has said till 5th standard, allow for the children's languages to be the forefront, and post that gradually transition them into the standardized global Englishes and English that comes. And so that comes through. I think you need to get them to understand, one, that there are varieties and that they need to work for it in order to respect the others, right? And to understand it. If they go to Australia, Australian. If they go to America, American. It helps them to understand that they must change a bit. I think so. Priya, wonderful. Students who are not comfortable in writing in English, is it allowed at the initial stages of learning? And if so, what strategies? Could you scroll down a bit, Nidhi? What strategies would you recommend to gradually encourage and supports them to transitioning? Yes, translanguaging has now become a very important aspect of teaching primarily. And I would say that, yes, you can allow them to use their languages should I be stopped sharing? Yeah, you can allow them to use their languages in the way that you're saying initially and transition them. They need to feel confident about using language. And so initially you can. But I think the best way to do this is also, and you will find this in your other texts as well, where they have said that ultimately we need to be able to work with languages, with getting them to understand the global standard English. So yes, we can do that as we do with children, right? They will use other forms. They say for lemon, they will say melon, and you keep saying, yes, good point. You meant lemon, right? And you sort of enable them with positive scaffolding, not correcting them, but positively telling them, rephrasing their words, giving them more opportunities in it.
Maybe
Yes.
a quick call for question. Deepa.
Next
Yeah,
question is,
last question. Go ahead, Nidhi. Sorry.
yeah, ma'am. The next question is by Deepa.
She has asked two
Two
questions.
questions.
Yeah. She has two questions. So, what is the difference between proxemics and part of paralanguage? Paralanguage is really anything that is part of the other periphery of language. Language we look at as what is available in the dictionary. So, map signs are a dictionary. They have a language, right? But proxemics, chronomics, kinesics, all of these are not necessarily. So proxemics is really about the fact that how close you are to a person. So if there are two people shouting, but they are shouting with a desk in between them, like if I'm showing you on my screen with my hands as two people, and there is a desk in between them and they're shouting at each other, there's less likely that you will think that they're going to get into a physical fight. They're right here and they're shouting at each other. You're like, now they will fight. And so, yes, that proximity of things. Kings used to use this, darbar, the longer it is away and you have to walk towards the king, you're showing power. Nowadays, you will find this in the same power is being used in an office where you have the CEO sitting far away from the door. And so when one enters, the higher and bigger the official is, the bigger the room is, it shows power. And you will also find that, say, people like, for instance, in Jio, in Reliance, what Mukesh Ambani has done is have most all managers also sit alongside their things. So it shows that there is no power distribution. There's smaller offices, less power hierarchies that are there. So it is part of the nonverbal communication, yes. And all of that is part of where you're looking at through the language that comes in. When you're looking at what is the difference between paralanguage, I don't think you have read the text, right? Because some of this is being explained in the text. And I think you should be careful in looking through it. Paralanguage is a subset of nonverbal communication. Paralanguage is really about the pitch, the tone of voice, etc., that comes in. So everything that deals with your voice, your sounds, that would be the paralanguage, right? So I think that explains it. Yes. How can this taxonomy? Oh, she has another question. How can this taxonomy? In fact, there were two questions even in the earlier one, actually. How are these taxonomies helping teachers develop student communicative competence rather than linguistic competence? I think I have explained that part to you right now, so I'm not going to be looking at it. So this helps you to figure element. Okay, I don't know how to pronounce that. Vaipayan. Okay. Okay. Does using English act as a helpful scaffolding tool that helps beginners learn English faster, or does it create a crutch that prevents them? Yeah, this is again very similar to the earlier question. How much do we do? It helps. I would say start looking at how much of your percentage of your class is really about translanguaging and whether you are using it more and the students are using it less. So your language use maybe more English, but you allow and facilitate students to use English. Difference. There is a difference. Students using English to transition to English, very different from you constantly speaking in English and them not getting exposure. How will a child learn language? A child learns language through exposure. Any person learns language through exposure. So when you go into another country, you hear so much of the language that you start picking it up. Now, another way of getting them to learn language is to get them to imitate the accent or the rhythm of speech, because every language has its own rhythm of speech. And you can just tell them, speak nonsense words, but pretend that you're speaking it in English. How will you speak English? So you can only use nonsense words. It's a great activity to do in a class, especially young classes. Tell them, okay, I'm going to speak Chinese. You can speak nonsense words and make me think what is the difference between Chinese and Hindi and English. And you will find that the students listen to those sounds and they start looking at the accent and the rhythm. And once they feel that, then they start, picking it up better. So there is that part of imitation you may have to make conscious. And yes, the idea is to get them over a period of time, but please understand NEP says till the younger classes, multilingualism, translanguaging, etc., very much encouraged. And so we should not penalize them. In older classes, we transition them with positive scaffolding by rephrasing, reframing towards picking it up. Yes. How is a mismatch between a person's paralanguage and the proxemics lead to miscommunication in professional or Kriti, this is common sense. I mean, films show this. I'm saying, I say that I'm not angry, I'm telling you I'm not angry. I am really not angry, but I am clutching my hand, I am pumping my fist, I am catching hold of someone. Obviously, you will have this mismatch, and it creates for comedy, it creates for confusion, but it can create for a great lot of figuring out what is to be done. A lot of films use this all the time, so you can use it there. And drama is very good for this, to say, how do I want to communicate and misguide the reader or the viewer. Why is sign language not considered under constructed languages? In fact, I did put it under constructed, but you will also find that sign languages are evolving languages. And you will find that if you saw the screen to a large extent, in the anatomy of languages, you will find that language of in the text also, you will find that it has to evolve. And there are instances, you said why they're not considered a constructed language, is there are instances of it evolving by students in a one school. I can't remember the name of the country right now, but I will give you the example by the end of this session. But there is a whole place where there were a lot of deaf children, and they kind of evolved the language for themselves. And so it is not a conscious intended construction, right? The idea of intentional construction, where I will say this word means this. No, that's not how it evolves. It evolves by everyone agreeing what that language is. So for instance, when I talk about courage or bravery or India, for instance, it evolves from a particular kind of thing. So if I say thank you, it evolves from it. It is an evolving language. And you will find that there are varieties of ASL and ISL and etc. Otherwise, you would have had just one sign language. And so it is evolving in context, in geographies, in societies. And so you have an Omani sign language and a Indian sign language and an American sign language and a British sign language, and so on. So they are evolving in societies as per their notion. So therefore that difference. Yeah, Rajni, I think I answered that question. How can we as English teachers erase the masculine dominance in the language? Not just masculine and feminine. In fact, the binary itself should be challenged, because we do accept other genders. And so we make them a little bit more conscious of where all they can bring in the neutral spaces. I think by finding those words and being very conscious activists of replacing those words with the neutral or the common gender in that sense. So we can try getting the students themselves to act as detectives and replace the words and act as activists in that sense. So we can do that. Yeah. How to handle slang used by students? What rules can be used to identify acceptable slangs? I have a very interesting quip for it. There was a time when, people were finding language very offensive. They said Latin has been reduced to slang all the time. People are not speaking it well. And then that slang evolved into what we now know as French. So, slang is really a language waiting to be discovered. I think what we talk about is whether it is acceptable or not by looking at what is the majority comfortable with. Please, a language is for communication. Communication is for creating more pleasant, communication strategies. So ideally, we should try and make everyone feel comfortable. So as long as your words make others feel comfortable, use it. If it makes someone uncomfortable because they don't know, or they feel hurt, then no, don't use it, right? Because that is the purpose of communication, to also make people feel that they share something with you. That's why when you're angry, it is not good communication. It is ineffective. So find a way to express yourself and your emotions without making the other person also feel angry. It degenerates communication. And that, I think, is the same thing we bring into slang. And over a period of time, if more and more people use it, for instance, okay is a slang that has now become a part of our lives. There are many words that are considered now abusive language that were official languages, and so on. Yeah. Deepika has another question. How can teachers create classrooms where every child's language is respected? I think I explained this answer, so I'm not going to repeat that answer. There is pure language. Are they influenced by other languages over time? Yeah, all languages are influenced by other languages. The only language that's not influenced is a dead language. You will find that all languages are influenced. Sanskrit has new words like computer and things. It's not just language. They are influenced by other changes, right? When Sanskrit was there was no such thing as a telephone. But of course, we can look at Durbash and all of those as elements that come in. So languages will be influenced by changes in society, in technology, and by other languages having words for them, by other experiences. Why do we have so many words for so many different relations, but we have only one word for, in Hindi, for instance, barf is snow and ice. But if you go to Eskimos, they will have like 23 different words for just different types of snow, light snow, cold snow, heavy snow, and all of it, because it's the experience that comes in. So if we go there, we will distinguish and we will find it. Do you know that in all languages, blue is one of the last words to be discovered as a word? It's really the fact of things. And there are some languages where there's no word for blue, actually, because they consider all of that in the green palette. And Russian is one of the words which has maximum types of blues. And so they're very, very good at perceiving differences in blues. And so, yes, languages perceive and create those differences that come in. Preeti, I can't see her question, Nidhi. How can the bridge between actual rooted language and current be minimalized? I don't know whether the ethnicity and the quality of actual English words are. I mean, do we want to go back to Shakespearean language? We will constantly be changing. I think what I gave that example earlier of enabling that slang aspect, I think we have to get them to consider that they have to speak to a lot of millennials, to a lot of, older people, and they should learn how to talk to them. And they are going to be their bosses, they're going to be their employers, and they're going to be their clients and customers and people who are in their family, and they should learn how to speak to them using their language register. And so that is important. And you could have your own language that you're speaking amongst your friends. Just as there are tones and tones and etc. that you would have. I think that's how we have to do it. But I also have this problem of the quality and ethnicity of this old language, because then we should go back to Old English, which we can't understand. That's a Chaucerian English. And even before that, English is just 9th century. It was before that Anglo-Saxon, Germanic, Indo-Germanic languages. Then it was before that Latin and all things. So I don't think we are going to those prototypian languages. So we should not be so purist, but we should get the students to understand, hey, you want to talk to this rest of the world? This is the language you will need to use. This is where we are. I think that will help them understand it. Anjali, Sanskrit aren't everyday language. If preservation safeguards a language, what additional purpose does reviving? Any language, not just Sanskrit. It could be any language that you revive. It helps you to tap into certain kinds of perceptions that you don't have. I just finished speaking about the word blue. as an example of what that consciousness of doing is. So if you have languages, for instance, Andaman Nicobar Islands have a lot of languages that have died, many languages, and there is an entire concerted effort. It's not just Sanskrit, so I don't want to make this about political issues, but even in Andaman Nicobar Islands, there are certain languages which have already died, or they're dying. There are only 5 speakers for the language. So there's an active effort to both preserve and document that language and keep it, because you have certain kinds of perceptions, certain kinds of words that only occur in that language because only that language had that experience, because it was rooted in that geography, and then you're missing out on it, right? So for instance, the way that certain languages don't have numbers, they are anumeric languages, they don't have numbers beyond at all, or they have numbers only up till 10. Now, if you had only words up till 10, numbers up till 10, that's your conceptual thing. That is mathematical reasoning, right? Now, how will you describe a picture like this? We have 160 people in our group. How will you even describe this meeting? You will have to keep listing every single person. So now you're present and you notice every single person. So if they had chickens, which were 20, they named their chickens, right? So now that's a way of living. That's a way of noticing. That is what the language does to us. Of knowing different languages allows us to broaden our perspectives. And it's from those angles of cognitive reasoning that you may want to learn it. Yeah. Okay. Okay, if there are other questions or I have not answered anything adequately, please do let me know.
Yeah, right. So we can take 1 or 2 questions from any participant. They can unmute themselves and ask if they have. Please raise your hand. We'll call your name.
Yeah.
Vijay Ganguly has raised his hand. Vijay, can you ask the question? Vijay Ganguly.
No, sir, by mistake, I've just clicked that.
I will just take one question, which is from Preeti on pronunciation before we take up Swati. But you said that instance change in pronunciation, there are times when change in pronunciation can lead to misunderstanding of the exact word pronounced. I agree. Read, read, lead, led, and so on are also words that can lead to misunderstandings. But that should not stop us from speaking, right? There can be also spelling errors that lead to misunderstandings. That doesn't stop us from reading. Desert, for instance, spelling differences. So one part is also about the context of not just the person having to speak. Communication is 50% sender, 50% listener and receiver. So reading in context, listening in context is important. So if they pronounce or mispronounce a word, doesn't mean that we should make them feel the other person also has work. The reason is that pronunciation is one of the reasons why people say, I don't know how to pronounce the word, so I won't speak. And we should get them to speak. As they speak, they improve their fluency, they will improve their accuracy also. They have to listen more. That's why they were not able to pronounce. Yeah, Swati, sorry.
Swati, you can ask the question. Swati, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, my question is, now we have this inclusive education. We follow the inclusive education. Now, in this inclusive education, how can this, you said that awareness of language variation and hidden bias could transform the role of language teacher in creating an inclusive learning environment in our day-to-day teaching learning process?
The fact that your text itself says about chairman, chairperson, and so on are hidden biases. The variations, if you do discourse analysis of who all is considered brave, the biases that come in that a mother has to be brave, or the word sacrifice, whom does it come associated with? There could be so many of those things, right? Don't cry like a girl. What does that mean? The only girls cry? Is that a bad thing? Can't boys cry? All that, right? And now what has happened is advertisements have taken them and done a very good twist with them, right? Like don't cry like a girl has been said. Instead we should be teaching them ki ladke rote nahi ko sikhana chahiye ki ladke rulate nahi. These have been kinds of advertisements that Madhuri Dixit, etc., have been part of. So you are taking some of these and you're seeing ads on social discourse which are twisting them to tell you how language has shaped certain biases and come in. And we can get them a little bit more conscious. Ads can really play a good job in doing that. There is this very early Fair and Lovely ad which was very fun, which said, please God, no marks. And it is a, college looking student who is saying it. And you're like, kaun aisa marks ke liye nahi bolta? And then you realize ki wo Fair and Lovely laga rahi hai, and then it is no marks. Now that's a great pun on language, but it's also a great pun on the kind of biases that we have in our head ki marks to humne सिर्फ एग्जाम के साथ जोड़ के रखा हुआ है और बच्चों को सिर्फ हमेशा मार्क्स चाहिए रहते हैं. तो these are kinds of things that we can question them कि क्या ऐसा हो सकता है कि there are times when a child does not want marks. For instance, I know of students who don't want to join engineering and so they underperform in 12th so that उनके माँ बाप उन्हें engineering college में दाखिला नहीं दे सकते and they can only join arts college. So there could be all these kinds of elements that we can pick up in terms of it. Inclusive में आप और थोड़ा और सोच सकते हैं. Sorry, yeah.
Ma'am, now there's one last question by Miss Deepa Rastogi. I would like her to ask the question.
Hello, ma'am. Good afternoon. Ma'am, I just want to know that as a teacher of English, we are expected to learn exhibit and explore absolutely perfect things. Like sometimes we are asked some spellings and some pronunciation, some latest trend. So how come to know the latest rule, the pronunciation and accents and all?
वो तो मैं पहले से बोल रही थी कि वो डिपेंड करता है दीपा कि आप कौन सा प्रोनाउंसिएशन सिखाना चाहते हैं. अगर आप अमेरिकन प्रोनाउंसिएशन सिखा रहे हैं, बहुत सारे बच्चे दे आर रीडिंग अमेरिकन प्रोनाउंसिएशन, दे आर लिसनिंग टू अमेरिकन फिल्म्स and so that is schedule versus schedule. Water. All of these are, I would like some water, please. This is American. I would like some water. That is British. So what do you want? The British pronunciation or the American? There's no such thing as right or wrong. In fact, I had this very good experience. A Tamil child, he was saying water, because that's how we speak a lot of in lot of Tamil Nadu, it is water. And then the computer machine learning showed consistently as wrong. And then he came up to me and he said, can you put on this Home Alone clip if you have your thing? And Home Alone is an American movie, and it said water and in that clip. And he said, what is wrong? And what do you want me to say? And I said, well, it is British English, so it will want you to say water. And he said, but that is also an English movie and it says water, and it is not, it is closer to my water. And so I was laughing and I was saying, great, good, conscious job. And I think we need to be careful, because when we say global citizens, they may also go and land up in Africa. Africa has very different pronunciations. They may be in Australia. Australia doesn't say mate as mate. It says might. It says gite. It says all these elements. So you will have to, the dictionary, we follow the British dictionary and we follow the British English, and the dictionary does give you the pronunciation. Now you have audio transcripts for the pronunciations and they can listen to it. And in fact, a lot of the online dictionaries do allow you to understand the difference between American and British pronunciation, at least, because most of the world does use a lot of either the British or the American pronunciation. But there's no one singular correct English pronunciation. The New Zealand Prime Minister and the Australian Prime Minister have different meaning, different pronunciations for the word like result, 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 result. The z, s, o, etc. is very different. And correct, correct, correct. There are differences. You will find this across the world. And so maybe we should get them to be a little bit more tolerant of differences. To some
Ma'am,
extent.
sometimes students as well also asked to us like which accent should we follow, British or American? So
In school English, we are following, even as of now, the NCRT and everything does follow the British received pronunciation. Yes, that I think is also the question that others had asked in the chat. So yes, in school as of now, it is the British received pronunciation. We are still, spellings are British also largely. So yes.
All right. Thank you so much, ma'am. As per the time limits, we'll stop the QA session for now. And people who are having further questions, they can ask it in the next session. Now, on the basis of the communication of the candidates and their kind of questions, we randomly select one candidate to present a vote of thanks. So I would like to call Ms. Priya Yadav to give a vote of thanks and share the feedback of the class. Ms. Priya, are you there in the class?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'm very much there. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, please.
Ma'am, and it was an honor to be part of the group that has the privilege of learning from you.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
please show yourself. I mean,
Yeah.
switch on your camera.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Ma'am, a very good morning to you. I am truly grateful for the valuable time you have shared with us. Being taught by someone with such expertise in her field was an inspiration and enriching experience. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Right.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, on behalf of everyone and the institute and all the participants, I would formally thank you for your wonderful session. It was enriching for candidates as well as for me as a student, and for everyone, I believe. And we are hoping to see you and have sessions with you further in our courses as well. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Nice to see you, ma'am. After a long time, we'll see in physical. After January, I think we met in January in one of the conferences. January or February. So nice. Thank you very much, ma'am. You're muted, ma'am. You're muted.
January in INET in Delhi, in
INET.
Sonipat. Yeah.
Right. We'll see. So we'll meet soon. Thank you.
Thank you
very
so much, ma'am.
It was wonderful. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Sure.
Okay, ma'am. Have a nice day. Bye bye.